Jenson Button is often regarded as a driver who excels in pretty much every single category and can reliably perform at the top level in a decent car. However, the 2009 world champion moved to McLaren in an attempt to become the first driver since Juan Manuel Fangio to win back-to-back championships with different constructors. Now, he was partnered against Lewis Hamilton, who is now currently regarded as one of the greatest drivers of all time, and if not the best of our current generation. So the question needs to be asked, how good was Jenson Button against Lewis Hamilton? Now, this is video number 3 in a small little series that I'm doing which analyses the race pace of various different teammate pairings in order to create an interconnecting web to predict and project future teammate pairings and then also teammate pairings that could never exist. If you would like to go and check out the 2 previous videos in this series, I'll pop them in cards throughout this video. Now, just as a small little disclaimer, this video is not to discredit any achievements of any of the drivers that are looked at in this series. It is just simply to compare each of the 2 drivers together when they were teammates in equal machinery. Now, we need to really understand the overall methodology behind this series. It will be the same methodology for each teammate pairing that we take a look at. We have driver A and driver B, every single one of their lap times for one race distance. And we start with step 1 of a 5-step process, which is to remove lap number 1, any VSC, safety car, red flag or pit stop laps and any slow laps as well. This is a completely manual process which I will go through after highlighting the slowest laps in their list and then remove each of those. Then from step number 1, we can take a look at step number 2, which has this list of lap times now, and step 2 is to identify just the clean air laps, where a clean air lap is any lap time set outside of a period of time of the car in front. Now, this period of time can be 2 seconds, it can be 3 seconds, it can even be 4 seconds. This wholly depends on the track that they are racing on. And what this step does is it basically identifies the raw pace of the 2 drivers at that one circuit. Now, obviously there could be an example where a driver is stuck in traffic and doesn't have a lot of clean air laps and their pace isn't really shown. Now, that happens in a lot of instances of Formula 1. So yes, the clean air laps don't accurately reflect what really happened in a season. It's more accurately reflecting what could have happened in the season had they ran at their clean air lap pace. And that is exactly what this is designed to do, to extract the maximum performance of both drivers in clean air to compare them against each other. So after step number 2, we move to step number 3 with the clean air laps identified. We then remove the fastest 10% and the slowest 30% from this list. This is to basically remove any outliers possible from the identified clean air laps and to give us a nice middle range for each driver. Then from step number 3, we take a look at step number 4, which is to identify the laps that were set on the same lap of the Grand Prix. Now, this completely negates if a clean air lap was set in the second half of the race, which would obviously end up being quicker than one set in the first half of the race. If they were both set on the same lap, both cars will be running the same fuel loads. Now, there is the small little topic of discussion of different tyre strategies. However, as we are considering teammate comparisons, split strategies among teams aren't overly common. Yes, they do happen, so yes, it will impact upon these results. However, it will be a small, negligible amount of results. And then from step number 4, with the identified laps on the same lap, we move to step number 5, which is to then calculate the percentage difference across these lap times, which is doing 1 minus the driver A's lap time divided by the driver B's lap time times by 100 to get these percentages here, where a positive value is an advantage for driver A and a negative value is advantage for driver B, and these percentages across all of the remaining laps can be averaged to give an overall difference for that race. Now, the majority of racing laps do get whittled down to roughly 30 to 40% of the total race distance. That's the sort of lap counts that we are looking at for each of the races that do get compared. So with the methodology all concluded, we'll now take a look at 2010, Jenson Button and Lewis Hamilton's first year as teammates. And running all of those calculations through the races of the 2010 season, we end up with a graph that looks a little bit like this, where the red dots above the 0% is for Lewis Hamilton and the blue dots below the red line is for Jenson Button. And in this 2010 season, there were 12 out of the 19 races that were counted, with Monaco being excluded because there were not enough clean air laps set for Jenson Button to perform a sensible average, and exactly the same for Italy, but for Lewis Hamilton. Hungary was excluded because there were no laps set on the same lap after the truncation period, and then Australia, China, Belgium and Korea were all excluded because they were rainy races. And averaging out all of these dots together gives us an advantage to Lewis Hamilton in their first season of 0.18% per lap in clean air, where there were 9 races ahead for Lewis Hamilton and 3 for Jenson Button, where 0.18% per lap roughly equates to just over a tenth at short circuits such as Monaco, Austria and Canada, and just shy of 2/10 at longer tracks like Spa, Singapore and Malaysia. And so from 2010 we can take a look at 2011, their second year as teammates at McLaren, and mapping on the progression throughout this season it looks a little bit like this, with Button again in the blue and Hamilton in the red. And for this year there were 12 out of 19 races counted once again, with Belgium and Brazil being excluded because there were not enough clean air laps for Lewis Hamilton this time, with Canada, Britain, Hungary excluded because they were rainy races. And this year, averaging out the dots together, we end up with an advantage for Jenson Button of 0.2% per lap in clean air, where there were 6 races ahead each for both of the British drivers. Where 0.2% per lap roughly equates to 1.2 tenths at Monaco, Austria and Canada, and just over 2 tenths at Spa, Singapore and Malaysia. And then finally from 2011 we'll take a look at 2012, their final year as teammates at McLaren. And mapping on all of the values for the 2012 season, we end up with a graph that looks a little something like this. Where for this season there were 12 out of 20 races counted, with Korea being excluded because there weren't enough clean air laps for Jenson Button, and Belgium and Bahrain excluded for the same reason but for Hamilton. Where this year Monaco, Britain and Abu Dhabi were excluded because there were no lap times set on the same lap after the truncation period, with Malaysia and Brazil being rainy races. And averaging out this year's results, we end up with an advantage for Lewis Hamilton of just 0.11%, where there were 5 races ahead for Hamilton and actually 7 for Button. So even though Button was faster for more races in this year, it was Hamilton who had a bigger advantage in the races that he was ahead. Where 0.11% roughly equates to 65 milliseconds at Monaco, Austria and Canada, and just over a tenth of a second at Spa, Singapore and Malaysia. So that is the race pace for each of the 2 British drivers at McLaren. Now obviously there are a bunch of other different analyses that you can do. You can do points analysis, you can do qualifying analysis and all sorts of other different ones. But I'm trying to do something just a little bit different compared to every other analysis that is out there. But what we can do now is we can plot on all of those end year values onto one graph overall, where we have 2010, 2011 and 2012, where Hamilton was comfortably quicker for 2 seasons and Jenson Button was comfortably quicker for the 1. And overall throughout this 3-year stint as teammates there were 36 out of 58 races that were counted, with 2 races not being included because there weren't enough clean air laps for Button, compared to 5 for Lewis Hamilton. There were 9 rainy races in this period and there were 4 races where there were no same laps after the truncation period. Then averaging out these 3 dots we get an overall advantage to Lewis Hamilton just by 0.03% per lap over Jenson Button, where in total there were 20 races ahead for Hamilton and 16 for Button, where 0.03% is just 15 milliseconds at Monaco, Austria and Canada, and just 30 milliseconds at Spa, Singapore and Malaysia. So of all of the teammates that we have looked at so far in this little series, this is by far and away the closest teammate pairing that I have looked at. Now on screen is a list of the teammate comparisons that I have done so far. Alonso versus Massa, where Alonso was faster by 0.4% per lap, Vettel versus Webber, where Vettel was faster for 0.16%, and now Button versus Hamilton. So please let me know in the comments down below of any other teammate pairing that you would like me to take a look at. I have race data from 2006 to the present day. I'm slowly updating my database going backwards in time, but it is taking a very long while. So if there are any comparisons that you would like me to make from 2006 onwards, then please let me know in the comments down below. But that is all I've got for you today, guys. I do welcome any other comments from you that you have for suggestions for the series or just general comments about the mathematics. But that's all I've got for you today, guys. I hope you have enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next video with whatever and whenever I decide to make it. I'll see you guys then.